made lurid and false claims about the royal family, which played on her fears and fueled paranoia.
Royal banquets are meant to showcase unity, elegance, and tradition, but this time the spotlight turned into a storm.
Well, I'm not sure what I'm able to bring. It's what all these very brave ladies tell me.
When Queen Camilla arrived wearing one of Catherine's most treasured gowns, the gesture struck like a lightning bolt through palace walls. For Prince William, it wasn't just a breach of etiquette. It was a painful insult to his wife and her place in the monarchy. Witnesses say his fury was impossible to hide. So, why would Camilla make such a daring choice, and what fallout could it spark? A banquet meant for unity. The grand banquet at Buckingham Palace embodied perfection, an awe-inspiring display of monarchy's tradition and power. Golden chandeliers, gleaming marble floors, sparkling silver cutlery, crystal glasses, and fragrant rose garlands transformed the vast hall into a regal masterpiece, reminding the world of Britain's enduring grandeur and timeless royal authority. The guests, too, understood the script they were meant to follow. Foreign dignitaries, their titles weighty and their alliances carefully measured, strolled gracefully in gowns and suits cut from the finest silks. Diamonds glittered at ears and wrists. Tiaras gleamed beneath carefully arranged hair, and conversation hummed at a low, respectful pitch. Nothing was meant to disturb the fragile balance of elegance and reverence. In one corner, the orchestra played softly, weaving a soundtrack that seemed to float beneath the chandeliers like a hidden spell, binding every gesture and every glance into a larger performance. Because that was what the banquet truly was: performance. It was not simply dinner, it was theater at the highest level. Every napkin fold, every floral arrangement, every musical note had been rehearsed, perfected, and polished until it carried the weight of the crown's authority. To the untrained eye, this was harmony in motion, a kingdom still strong and serene, a monarchy untouched by scandal or change. And yet, beneath the glittering facade, cracks were forming. No one could see them in the gleam of the marble, but they were there, etched deep into the relationships of those who sat at the head of the table. For weeks, the family had been caught in the storm of public speculation. Newspapers and tabloids had feasted on whispers of discord, rumors of bitter arguments behind closed doors, accusations of betrayal that pitted one relative against another, and outlandish tales too delicious for the press to resist. Every headline had chipped away at the image of unity that the palace fought so hard to project. Tonight's banquet was supposed to be the grand rebuttal to it all, a living declaration that the monarchy was steady, unbothered, and untouchable. The staging was perfect, the guest list carefully curated, the cameras positioned to capture the majesty without revealing the unease. All the world needed to see was glittering glass, polite laughter, and the comforting illusion that nothing within these ancient walls ever faltered. But illusions are fragile things. They shimmer beautifully, but they can shatter with the smallest crack. And on this night, that crack appeared in a form no one could have predicted. Not in a speech gone wrong, not in a poorly timed gesture, but in fabric. A gown. It was meant to be just another dress in a room full of couture, but clothes, in royal life, are never just clothes. They are symbols, statements, and sometimes weapons. This gown carried with it echoes of another woman, another story, another claim. And as the cameras flashed and the guests turned their heads, what should have been the monarchy's strongest moment became the spark that threatened to unravel it all. The chandeliers still glittered, the orchestra still played, the roses still filled the air with sweetness. But beneath the performance, something had shifted. In that instant, the monarchy's carefully staged show of strength began to look less like theater and more like a mask about to slip. What happened at the banquet? Was it something so serious? Could it result into a serious consequence? Let's find out. The moment the room froze. The grand hall fell silent as King Charles entered, his calm face shadowed by years of duty. Behind him, Queen Camilla strode with regal poise, her silver gown shimmering under the chandeliers. Admiration rippled through the crowd. She appeared every inch a commanding, radiant queen. But admiration is a fragile thing. It lasted only seconds before it began to wither. First, a few eyes widened. Then came the sharp intake of breath, the subtle but unmistakable shift in the air. A murmur spread from one corner to another, like fire, racing from wick to wick. Fans were lifted to faces, hands covered mouths, and whispers slipped between rows of startled guests. What they saw was more than a gown. It was a memory come alive, a symbol too sacred to be worn by another. That gown did not belong to Queen Camilla. Everyone in the room knew it. It was Catherine's. Years earlier, the Princess of Wales had stepped into the spotlight in that very dress. She had worn it at a state banquet that marked her as the monarchy's shining future. The moment had been immortalized in photographs, splashed across newspapers and magazines, framed in the memory of millions. Catherine, in that gown, had become an image of grace, elegance, and hope, a living emblem of the royal family's promise to renew itself for the next generation. To see anyone else in it, especially Camilla, was nothing short of shocking. The orchestra, almost unconsciously, faltered. Notes wavered in the air as though the violins themselves had lost their breath. Across the long tables, dignitaries exchanged uneasy glances, their smiles stiffening. Conversations drying up mid-sentence. Even the servants, trained to remain unseen and unshaken, could not hide their reactions. Their eyes darted sideways, betraying their disbelief. The air grew thick with tension. Admiration had curdled into outrage, though no voice dared speak it aloud. What had begun as a grand entrance was now a scandal unfolding in real time. And then the moment reached its climax. Catherine entered. She appeared radiant, poised, and graceful as always, her smile carefully measured, her steps flowing with practiced ease. Yet those who looked closely, those near enough to catch the subtle flicker in her eyes, saw what lay beneath the polished exterior. Behind the serene smile was a storm brewing. It was not loud or dramatic, but quiet and piercing, the kind of storm that could unsettle even the strongest hearts. Her eyes told the truth that her lips refused to voice. Betrayal. The room seemed to hold its breath. All at once, admiration, disbelief, and unspoken judgment clashed in the silence. Every gaze moved between the two women, the queen, who wore the gown, and the princess, to whom it truly belonged. The scene had shifted from pageantry to drama, from celebration to confrontation, without words. What should have been a night of unity and spectacle had instead become a spectacle of its own, one that would echo far beyond the gilded walls of the banquet hall. Who was the first to notice the anomaly? How did he react? Does the reaction bear any weight? Let's delve into the details of the reaction that followed Camilla's elegant appearance. William's silent eruption. Prince William noticed it before anyone else. The moment Camilla entered the grand hall, his eyes narrowed, his gaze clung to the gown she wore, and in an instant, recognition struck him like lightning splitting the night sky. It wasn't just a dress. It was the dress. He knew every fold, every shimmer of silk, every carefully woven stitch of embroidery. The sight dragged him back into memory, as if someone had torn open a door to the past. That gown belonged to his wife. His Catherine's gown. A sharp wave of disbelief crashed into him, followed by something darker. His jaw tightened. His chest felt like it was bound in iron, and his fists clenched so hard under the tablecloth that his knuckles turned bone white. Around him, Soft murmurs rose like smoke in the air. But William barely heard them. To him, this wasn't a mistake or a coincidence. It was an act. A deliberate, carefully planned move. His thoughts sharpened to a single point. How dare she? The words slipped from his lips in a whisper, so low only those closest could catch it. Yet his tone was cold, edged with steel. He wasn't speaking as a son-in-law or as a guest at a royal banquet. He was speaking as a man whose honor and whose wife's dignity had just been trampled on. Those nearby began to notice the shift in him. His posture was no longer relaxed but rigid, tense, like a bowstring pulled too tight. His face remained calm, but his eyes burned with a storm that refused to be hidden. A woman, seated 2 places away, leaned toward her companion and muttered, "He looks like he's about to explode." Another, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and fascination, added, "Look at his hands. They're shaking." Catherine noticed too. She knew her husband better than anyone, and she recognized the storm raging beneath his controlled exterior. Leaning closer, she touched his arm gently under the table. Her fingers, light and steady, tried to anchor him before he did something he might regret. Her voice was soft, almost a breath, but filled with calm authority. "Don't make a scene," she whispered. "Not here." "Not now." William turned slightly toward her, his jaw still set, but her touch kept him grounded. For a brief moment, the fury threatening to spill out of him found a dam in her presence. She was always his balance, the calm to his storm, the hand that reminded him of duty when emotion pushed him to the edge. But inside, the fire only roared hotter. His rage wasn't only about the insult to Catherine. No, this cut deeper, far deeper. That gown was more than fabric, more than a fashion choice. It was a memory, a symbol, a connection to his mother, Diana. Camilla stepping into the room wearing it was more than just poor taste. It felt like a direct wound to his family, an echo of the pain he thought he had buried long ago. Every shimmer of the gown wasn't just a reminder of Catherine. It was a shadow of his mother, a cruel reminder of the woman he lost and the complicated history that still haunted him. To William, it was not just disrespect, it was betrayal. And beneath the glittering chandeliers of the royal banquet, his fury burned, silent, but fierce enough to shake the air around him. Why was William's reaction so intense? Could it have triggered a traumatic feeling from his past? Let's dig into the details of feelings that engulfed him at that moment. Ghosts of Diana. The moment William's eyes landed on Camilla draped in Catherine's gown, it was as though the air had been sucked out of the grand banquet hall. It wasn't just a fashion choice. It was a knife twisting in wounds he had spent years forcing shut. The fabric, the cut, the unmistakable elegance of the gown belonged to Catherine. It was hers, a symbol of her grace and the quiet dignity with which she carried the crown. And now, seeing it worn by the woman who had long been tied to his mother's deepest suffering, ripped open the scars of his past. Instantly, the ghosts of memory surged back with merciless force. He was no longer in the glittering hall, but a boy again, watching his mother, Diana, the beloved people's princess, crumble under the weight of betrayal. He remembered her tears, the private ones no cameras caught, the kind that shook a child's world and made him vow never to let history repeat itself. He remembered the headlines, the humiliation that was paraded before the entire world, and the shadow that always lingered behind it all. Camilla. The pain of her absence pressed against his chest as sharp now as it had been on the night he lost her. Decades might have passed, but the emptiness she left behind never really dulled. Every milestone, every achievement, every joy he shared with Catherine was tinted by the ache of wishing Diana had been there to see it. And now, here in this room of glittering chandeliers and polite smiles, The woman whose presence had symbolized so much of Diana's torment dared to wear Catherine's gown. It was more than bad taste. It was an insult. To William, it felt like history clawing its way back from the grave, eager to torment him once again. First his mother, now his wife. Another woman he loved being pulled into a cruel game of comparison and intrusion. Another reminder that the past was not buried, only waiting for the right moment to strike. William's chest rose and fell heavily, as though each breath was a battle. His fists tightened at his side. Around him, the music swelled. Violins, laughter, the clinking of crystal glasses. But none of it could drown out the storm roaring inside his head. He could almost see his mother's face, her smile that lit up the world, her pain that had scarred his childhood, and the silent plea she had once left him with. Don't let them win. Leaning slightly toward Catherine, his voice low but thick with fury, he muttered words meant only for her. This is deliberate. She knows exactly what she's doing. Each syllable burned with the weight of old grief and new rage. In that moment, the banquet hall no longer felt like a celebration. To William, it was a battlefield, and Camilla's gown was no mere fabric. It was a weapon. The ghosts of the past had returned, dressed in silk and jewels, daring him to confront the pain he had tried so hard to bury. And deep inside, William knew, the storm within him was only just beginning. Did he eventually challenge Camilla for appearing in his wife's outfit? Or did he just swallow the rage, acting like it was nothing? Let's dive into the details of William's reaction. The corridor confrontation. Later that night, when the palace had finally quieted, William found himself unable to sit still. Every nerve in his body seemed alive, burning with restlessness. He pushed back his chair and muttered an excuse, though no one asked where he was going. The truth was, he didn't know himself. All he knew was that he needed to get away from the banquet, away from the whispers, away from the sight that had been gnawing at him since the evening began. His polished shoes struck against Buckingham's marble corridors, each echo bouncing off the high ceilings like a reminder of the storm inside him. He needed air, he needed space, he needed escape. But escape, as it seemed, wasn't going to be easy. Camilla appeared behind him, her steps softer but steady, as though she had been waiting. Whether it was coincidence or design, William couldn't tell. What he knew was that she had followed him, and soon enough they were standing in one of the palace's dim hallways. The walls here were lined with portraits, kings, queens, long-dead royals with watchful eyes, their gilded frames gleaming faintly under the muted light. It was as if the very ancestors of the crown were spectators to the confrontation about to unfold. William turned sharply, his face set with fury. His voice, though controlled, was sharp enough to cut through the silence. You knew that was Catherine's dress. Camilla met his eyes, her own expression calm, almost detached, as if she had grown used to storms like this. "It's just a gown, William. Don't be so dramatic." The words only fanned the fire. His composure faltered, anger slipping past the cracks in his royal restraint. "Nothing in this family is just anything," he spat. "That gown wasn't fabric, it was hers. It carried her memory, her moment, her dignity. And you wore it anyway, in front of everyone." Her lips pressed into the faintest trace of a smile, though her eyes narrowed with irritation. Her voice remained level, but her words carried venom. "You give too much power to ghosts. Perhaps it's time you stop living in Diana's shadow." "She's gone, William. You can't let the dead rule the living." The sentence hit him like a thunderclap. For a heartbeat, he couldn't breathe. His chest tightened, fury and grief crashing together, each feeding the other until he felt nearly undone. For all his training, all his duty, all his royal composure, nothing could dull the rawness of those words. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, heavy, with a truth he could no longer hold back. "You will never understand. You were the cause of her pain. And tonight, you didn't just insult her memory. You disrespected my wife in front of the world." For the briefest moment, Camilla's carefully held mask slipped. Something flickered. Hurt, guilt, maybe fear. But just as quickly, she pulled the veil of calm back over her face. William, however, didn't wait to see it settle. He turned on his heel and strode away, his shadow stretching long beneath the watchful portraits. Camilla remained standing, alone, beneath the silent gaze of centuries of monarchs, their painted eyes bearing witness to the clash between past wounds and present power. How was William's relationship with Camilla before that night? Was it a strained one or a cordial one? Let's dig into the details of how the two have been before the royal banquet. William's complicated relationship with Camilla. The relationship between Prince William, the Prince of Wales, and Queen Camilla is one of the most fascinating and complicated dynamics within the royal family today. This year has placed them in closer contact than ever before, largely due to the health struggles of King Charles III and Catherine, Princess of Wales, who are both battling cancer. With so much responsibility suddenly falling on William's shoulders, he has had to rely more on Camilla in certain areas of royal life. Professionally, they are forced to present a united front, supporting the king and ensuring the monarchy continues to function smoothly. Personally, however, their bond remains fragile, with decades of history weighing heavily on every interaction. For William, Camilla represents a deeply painful chapter of his past. Her role in the long and messy love triangle between King Charles, Princess Diana, and herself left scars that never truly healed. While the affair dominated headlines at the time, what is often overlooked is how much it shaped the childhood of William and his brother, Harry. They grew up watching their beloved mother suffer public humiliation and emotional turmoil while their father's relationship with Camilla unfolded in the shadows. For two young boys devoted to Diana, it was an early and unforgettable lesson in heartbreak. A palace insider recently affirmed that this history still lingers. There's a lot to overcome. The source explained that William and Harry have always struggled to trust Camilla. Their loyalty to Diana ran so deep that they could never bring themselves to fully accept her into their lives. According to the insider, they never felt comfortable opening up to her in any meaningful way, and the relationship remained distant, almost transactional. The tension is not only rooted in the past, however. Even as Camilla transitioned from Charles's controversial companion to his wife, and ultimately to Queen Consort, the skepticism from Diana's sons never truly softened. For William and Harry, Camilla was never just a stepmother. She was also a reminder of everything their mother endured. That emotional wall has been difficult, if not impossible, to dismantle. Adding fuel to the fire is Camilla's long-standing relationship with the British press, particularly the Royal Rota, the core group of journalists who cover the monarchy. For years, both William and Harry have had a love-hate relationship with the media, often blaming it for the relentless scrutiny and tragic outcome of their mother's life. Discovering that Camilla had allegedly cultivated her own ties with reporters to improve her public image only deepened the distrust. Prince Harry spoke openly about this issue in his memoir, Spare, describing how Camilla allegedly leaked stories to the press to rehabilitate her reputation at the expense of others. According to the royal insider, William quietly shared similar concerns. The insider revealed, William and Harry's distrust grew when they found out Camilla was leaking stories to the press to make herself look better. For two men who have always been fiercely protective of their privacy, this was a serious betrayal. What makes the situation even more delicate is that William and Camilla cannot completely avoid one another. With Charles undergoing treatment and Catherine focusing on her health, the spotlight often falls on William and Camilla to carry out royal duties. On the surface, they smile, attend events, and perform the rituals expected of them. But beneath the polished exterior, there is a quiet tension, an unspoken reminder of the past and the fractures that remain unresolved. To the public, Camilla may appear to have finally been accepted into the royal fold. But for William, her presence is complicated. She is both his father's wife and a symbol of his mother's deepest pain. In many ways, William's interactions with Camilla are not just about present-day obligations, but also about navigating ghosts from the past. Every shared engagement is layered with history, some of it too heavy to fully set aside. Ultimately, while William and Camilla now work side by side, their relationship continues to be shadowed by mistrust, resentment, and the lingering wounds of a love triangle that once shook the monarchy. And as the years go on, it remains uncertain whether those scars will ever completely heal. Was the news able to capture that moment? How could such news make headlines? How was it reported? Let's find out. The morning after. By the time the first rays of dawn touched the sky, the scandal had already escaped the gilded walls of the palace and swept across the globe like wildfire. Newspapers, television anchors, and online platforms blared with bold, sensational headlines. Camilla sparks, outrage, in Catherine's gown. William's fury erupts over Banquet scandal. Royal unity crumbles beneath silent feud. The images told their own story. Cameras had frozen every telling moment. The stiffness in William's jaw, the tight fists resting on the table, the forced smiles stretched across faces that barely masked disdain. Most striking of all were the glances darting across the banquet hall, cold, sharp, and cutting, like blades clashing in silence. To the public eye, no press statement could disguise the truth that the pictures screamed louder than words. Palace aides hurried into action, desperately drafting statements that attempted to soften the storm. They spoke of a simple misunderstanding, trying to convince the world that the infamous gown Catherine once wore had somehow been chosen by Queen Camilla without malice. But the public wasn't buying it. The gown was too iconic, too tied to Catherine's image, and the tension, glaring under the chandelier lights, was too obvious to ignore. Inside the private chambers of Kensington, the storm raged hotter. Prince William could not sit still. He moved back and forth across the room like a lion trapped behind bars, his anger barely contained. His voice broke through the stillness, shaking the air with raw emotion. First my mother, now my wife. How much longer must we endure these games? His words were heavy, his face flushed with a fury that had been building for years. Catherine, steady and graceful as always, reached for calm when her husband could not. She looked at him with quiet strength, her tone soft but unshakable. "You defended me," she said gently. "But remember, dignity will always echo louder than anger. If they mean to provoke us, let them. The world sees who we are, and that truth will speak for us." Her words carried weight. They soothed him for a moment, easing the storm in his chest, though deep down the fire refused to be extinguished. For William, this scandal wasn't about a piece of fabric draped across Camilla's shoulders. It was about so much more. The gown was a symbol, a wound reopened. It stirred memories of his late mother, Princess Diana, the pain she bore, the betrayals she suffered, the humiliation she was forced to endure beneath the public gaze. Now, to see his wife placed in a position that echoed those same wounds was unbearable. For William, protecting Catherine was not just duty. It was legacy, it was respect, it was a promise to shield her from the shadows that had once swallowed his mother. The banquet, intended to display a united royal front to the world, had instead done the exact opposite. It had cracked open the fragile facade, exposing divisions that no chandelier or golden cutlery could disguise. In the end, it was not the speeches that were remembered, nor the glittering decor, nor even the carefully staged toasts. It was the gown, a single garment that had spoken volumes. And its whisper of discord would linger in the palace corridors long after the lights dimmed and the guests departed. A gown had carried more power than words, and its echo promised to haunt the monarchy for years to come. So what do you think about Camilla's outfit at the banquet? Could she really want to torment William? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.